Hi, Dario. One, I do want to accommodate the fact that English is not your first language, fine, but I don't really think the miscommunication's just that in the sense that you have the same kind of miscommunications over these concepts with people who do speak English. So, it's not a big deal either way, in other words. It is just a language thing. Because, okay, part of the point of this for the last few videos between you and I has been to figure out if we really believe the same kinds of things, but we're talking about it differently. And to a certain degree, that's true. To a certain degree, no. There is this issue of objectivity, but to a greater degree, we do agree. You, my friend, are a skeptic. Okay? You said that we should never start building up dogmas. That is really the only skeptical position. Don't be dogmatic about the things that you know. You can assent to what appears to be the case, but don't be dogmatic. That's the point. And the point of me having this underpinning below that is very specifically to explain, well, why is there always doubt? I mean, if there's objective reality, why not be dogmatic? Why not, you found the objective reality, why not be dogmatic about it? Now, in terms of judging nature, I'm saying a couple things, okay? And the relativity is very important to understand why I say a couple things and they're not really contradictory, because they may seem contradictory, okay? First of all, I'm saying overall, nature as all of the universe, you can't really judge in the sense that everything is in there. If you say nature is bad because it doesn't have compassion, but you have compassion, well, it's self-refuting because you have compassion. But you can judge, subsets of reality with respect to a frame of reference. So, for example, I'm a living creature on the earth. I share genetic code with every other living creature on this earth. And that is also a frame of reference. And from within that frame of reference, I can start to make judgments. But let's go more narrow. I saw a nature program one time, and I think it was a cheetah went out to get food for her cub, or cubs, I forget. Anyway, she had chosen the wrong place to leave her cubs because there was a cobra nearby, and the cobra, of course, didn't want to eat the cubs, but it was threatened by the cubs and ends up killing the cubs. That's a tragedy, okay? I think that's a moral tragedy. It's sort of, you can't justify it by predation and animals have to eat. I mean, it was just a killing. The snake didn't know, the moral implications, but as a human, I can judge that as negative if it was to happen to a human, even more so, from within the human framework that we're all pretty close family, we humans. So we can judge nature in that sense, but we're judging a subset. Overall, in terms of the picture of the whole biosphere on the planet, no, I don't think we should judge nature negatively at all. Now, it's amoral. Somebody pointed out that it's amoral without morals, but it's not immoral, meaning it's not violating morals. It just doesn't have morals, don't apply in the first place, really. And the truth in that is that, we can judge this amoral nature as a positive thing still, for the simple reason that it gives us all life. It gives us all a chance. It gives us a chance to create morality. If the whole purpose of the universe, which of course I don't think that the universe has, just a purpose, but if the whole purpose of the universe was to create morality, create this higher level thing, then that's what is going on. It's given us the chance to create that. But we certainly can judge certain things, as negative. You build a bridge, it falls down. Yeah, that's negative from our frame of reference. Is it negative from the frame of reference of the sun, or of aliens, or of animals that don't use the bridge? No, not really. Doesn't matter to us, because we still decide that it's wrong. We still decide to build a stronger bridge as a result. So it doesn't change our behavior. But what does change in this understanding is that people can't jump to their dogmatic views quite so quickly. They can't just assume and as a mind trick, get people to pretend the errors are zero, and the error is zero, and the error is zero, and finally get down to this thing where the compound error is added up. Because like you say, it doesn't matter if that painting of the horse is accurate. Now, first of all, understand, if all I had to go through on the world was these paintings that this painter was created, I would know something about the world. Okay, I would. It just wouldn't be objective or absolute. And it might not matter because, oh, look, that really is what horses look like. I can look at that painting and see what a horse looks like. If I ever do see one with my own two eyes, I'll recognize it. It serves a purpose. On the other hand, maybe I'm trying to study the insects in that area, and a photo of that horse would include the insects unless they were too small or the angle wasn't right. And so we don't want to take these things as objective when really they're good enough approximations. A painter's painting of a horse, especially done realistically, is a good enough approximation for a vast majority of our our epistemological needs, our needs for knowledge. We can learn what a horse looks like, for example. But it's relative to the context. There is certain information that was in the scene that we won't get through that painting. Okay, and for some contexts, that information is important. Okay, and it's worthwhile remembering that we have these subjective images, because then when we get a new context where new information is important, we might realize, what? In the context of that painter, he had no reason to represent the fly on the back of the horse. Okay, but we happen to be studying insects and their interaction with horses, so we do want to see those things. Maybe we need to go commission another painter, go down there, make sure he represents all of the insects as well. And it creates humility. It reminds us why we don't want dogmatic knowledge. Even though we can get very, very certain knowledge, we don't want dogmatic knowledge. So I think we've answered how different our views are. Not very at all. I mean, skepticism is all about there is no dogmatic knowledge, but there still is knowledge. And in terms of human suffering, I totally want to strike that out. The only reason I don't focus on the term suffering, though, sometimes I do use that. I do use the concept of suffering and reducing suffering. But it's really, to me, the unjust suffering. I think there's some suffering that's sadness. Maybe, if the love of your life leaves you, you're going to be sad. It's going to be a judgment call whether we want to call that suffering or not. But you are going to be sad. So I just find that a little bit harder to get a hold of compared to the causes of suffering. See, suffering's basically a symptom. Something's gone bad, and then the suffering is a symptom of that. Yeah, you should address the symptom, but if people are in pain because they're being oppressed and worked like slaves, giving them pain pills and alleviating their suffering is just addressing a symptom. It might be better than nothing, but it's not anywhere near good enough. These people should be freed. That's the source of the misery is what needs to be addressed, not just the suffering itself. And so that's why I focus on that side of things. But that's not going to create a big difference between you and me. Because ultimately, yeah, I'm even for ending the suffering of someone that loses their lover. I would say, hey, be sad, but don't suffer about it. Don't you knock yourself out about it. Take what you've learned, take the good times you have, and move on, and have it be a good learning experience. And that can happen, But on the other hand, it's not really my place to meddle. Sometimes you need a good cry. Sometimes you're working something through. Your suffering is temporary, and it's just a temporary part of how you're coping. And ultimately, I can't really make a judgment about that as strongly as I can about oppressive relationships. The slave-master relationship, the indentured servitude of the world. That's something that I can judge. That's a relationship that I can judge much more concretely. I can say that's not appropriate. No matter what the individuals want. Somebody wants to be a slave, they can't really be a slave. They can act like a slave, they can do everything they're told and act like a slave for 20 years, but they're not really going to be a slave. You know why? Because they will retain their right to change the situation. Say, you know what, I don't want to play slave anymore. I decide to be my own person. So they can't give up that right. We're going to impose that on them. Okay? But I can't tell someone, don't suffer because you've lost a father. I mean, that's not my place. So again, in the narrow and the really fine-tuned judgment of things, I prefer to look at oppression and the relationships that are causing this suffering in the world. If there was just as much suffering in the world as now, but it was all because people, lost at a game of chess and they're just not very good losers, they should get over it. That's between them and their therapist. That's not, even if the suffering that they felt seemed just as intense, that wouldn't really count. compared to the injustice that causes suffering. So hopefully I've clarified that. Interesting conversation, and yeah, I think we've arrived at a point that we do agree. I look at physical reality and believe what I see there. I just know that it's approximate. You agree with that, and it's sufficient for me to act. So I think it's all good.